Hi, Professor. Hi, classmates. My name is Layla Gomez, and for my major work analysis assignment, I was assigned the story Drown by Junot Diaz. There are people who live in two neighborhoods that inspire most of Junot Diaz's work. The first one is the people living in Villa Juana, and the other is the people living in London Terrace area of New Jersey. Diaz was born on the very last day of the year 1968, and he lived in Villa Juana up until he was 4 years old. And right before his 5th birthday, he moved to New Jersey with his dad. One thing about becoming an American was that it was not something that he used as a source for his writing, like most would. One thing about Diaz is that he appreciated the dual-sided immigrant experience. The stories in Drown were influenced from his favorite authors in college. The first one was Sandra Cisneros, and the second was Toni Morrison. He paid his way through college by working a ton of side jobs, like washing dishes, making deliveries of pool tables, and a lot of other things. He attended at Keene College and he attended at Rutgers University, majoring in English. One of his novels, The Brief, Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde, won the Pulitzer Prize and the National Book Critics Circle Award for the Best Novel of 2007. The short story Drown by Junot Diaz is about his younger self trying to navigate his adolescence. The story shows us the challenges of family, of being poor, of dealing with an absent and abusive father, and a difficult relationship with his best friend, Beto. The story starts out by his mother telling him that his old friend is home from college. Before Beto went away to college, the two boys were basically inseparable. They would do things like steal, they would break things just for the fun of it, like windows, and they would even pee on people's doorsteps to challenge them and just to get a reaction from them. You know, boys. They also used to hang out at the pool, the mall, or playing stickball in the parking lot. He tells us about the neighborhood that he lived in and how it wasn't the nicest place. He lived alone with his mother, who he says has mastered living in silence. While on the other hand, his father had left the family to start a new life in Florida with a new woman, leaving him and his mother alone in their small apartment. He harbors a lot of resentment towards his father for abandoning them, and that plays a big part in the story. So Beto comes home from college and he goes to visit his mom, and they have a conversation about his future, his plans, and he asks about Junior, which is the main character, which it doesn't tell me that in the story. I had to go looking for it. But his mother can't understand why the two boys don't talk anymore. She thinks that whatever happened between them, they can work out and move on from. But Junior is just not budging. He does not want to be friends with Beto anymore because this happened twice. He touched him in a sexual manner. He put his hand on his thigh, his abdomen. He had his pants down, his head in his lap, and he was just ultimately uncomfortable by this. He realized that his best friend was gay, and he didn't know how to feel about his best friend touching him. So the story ends with him and his mom sitting down on the couch watching a classic movie together that had been dubbed to Spanish. And she falls asleep dreaming of walking in Boca Raton with her son's father. I really enjoyed this story by Junot Diaz. There are many literary devices that I highlighted throughout the story as I was reading, like symbolism, similes, metaphors, imagery, and foreshadowing. It was really hard to only choose one aspect because there were so many, but the one that really stood out to me and kept grabbing my attention while I was reading was the imagery of the story. He made it feel like, that we were there with him in the story, and it really helped me visualize what he was telling. In the first paragraph, he describes Beto's voice as a voice that cracked and made you think of an uncle or a grandfather. So we can really feel what he sounds like, hear what he sounds like, even though we don't know Beto. When describing his neighborhood, he says that he hated everything about the neighborhood. The break-apart buildings, the little strips of grass, the piles of garbage around the cans, and the dump, especially the dump. But without information like this, it would be very hard to envision the place where he grew up and that he's trying to explain to us. And it would leave it up more to interpretation. In the third paragraph, he says, the heat in the apartments was something heavy that had come inside to die. Families arranged on their porches, the glow from their TVs washing blue against the brick. From my family apartment, you could smell the pear tree that had been planted years ago. 4 to a quart, probably to save us all from asphyxiation. And little has changed. Not the stink of the chlorine, not the bottles exploding against the lifeguard station. I hook my fingers through the plastic-coated hurricane fence. In the story, when Junior went back to the pool that him and Beto used to hang out, he says, the water feels good. Starting at the deep end, I glide over the slick, tiled bottom without making a splash. Everything above the water is loud and bright. Everything below is whispers. When he comes up for air, he can hear everyone running, wet feet slapping against the hard concrete. And you can almost hear the slapping of the feet, and you can almost feel the water gliding over you as if I was in the same pool that he's in right now. Do you remember when I mentioned that his mother had mastered living in silence? Well, he says that he will enter a room and she'll stir, detaching herself from the cracking plaster walls and from the stained cabinets, and fright passes through him like wire. She'll pour coffee without a splash, walking into rooms as if gliding on a cushion of felt, crying without a sound. With this information, you feel as though you know exactly how his mother moves, as if she were your own mother. When he tells the story of the second time that Beto touched him, he says, I wasn't asleep or awake, but caught somewhere in between, rocked slowly back and forth the way surf holds junk against the shore, rolling it over and over. This creates a sensory experience for readers of being rocked by the waves. Imagine if he had told the story without that line. Readers would not know the way that he was feeling in that exact moment. We would not know if he was uncomfortable or if he enjoyed this interaction between him and Beto. That's the great thing about imagery. We can feel his emotions as if they were our own. The story ends with his mom falling asleep to the movie that he tells us. He tells us the light of the television is flickering across her face and her eyelashes begin to tremble. We now know that she fell asleep and she is dreaming to this movie because of the way that her eyelids and eyelashes are moving. Personally, this was one of my favorite stories that we have read this semester. I enjoyed many of the stories that we read, but this was definitely in my top 3. I think that you should 100% put this in your regular calendar for the next time that you teach this course. I know that many of us are different when it comes to, preference of readings, but I feel that this story is so much fun to read because of all the imagery that's in there. I feel as though that I'm in the story myself, and that while I'm reading the story, I'm visualizing it as if I was watching the movie. The story also teaches about the dual-sided immigrant experience and how they lived during this time, which is also really interesting to read, especially if you don't know much about it. Drowned has a lot of imagery, but it also leaves some things up to interpretation, which I think can lead to a really interesting discussion post for classmates to talk about. The story touches on the complex characters and relationships in his life, which many people could potentially relate to, and it makes for a good analysis. Personally, I would love to read my other classmates' analysis on this story if we read it as a whole class. It also explores immigration, racial issues, social classes, and that may open some readers' perspectives. Overall, I think The Drowned is a masterful work of literature that really showcases Diaz's talent for storytelling and his ability to capture the essence of the human experience. It is a story that will stay with you long after you finish reading it, and it leaves you with a deeper understanding of challenges and triumphs of the human spirit. I think that that's so special, and I loved the story, and I would 100% read it again. Thank you.